Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is I haven't figured out why this is happening, but I figured out what was happening, and I figured out a way that I could at least fix it enough to get this out of the driveway. And I got to give a shout out to my cousin John. He's a mechanic by trade. He actually owns some repair facilities, and I contacted him and he walked me through some test procedures to figure out what was going on, and he suggested that I look into this. This is a fusible link. There's a couple of them. There's one up here too, down in there. But this is it's like a 16 gauge fusible link. If you don't know what a fusible link is, this is like a last resort fuse. When everything else fails, this will burn out before the wire will fail. The first thing I did is I put a test light on this post, which is supposed to be 12 volt battery voltage at all times, whether the key's on or off. And of course I touched that to my test light and nothing, no power. So I figured, okay, well, must be that then. So I tested this side of the fusible link, no power. So all I did was I took this wire, which is a 30 amp fuse wire that I run to my cooling fan for the transmission cooler, and I made a new pigtail for it, and I hooked up 12 volt battery voltage to the alternator here, and it fires off, right? Where's my keys? I'll show you. Oh, I had to get another jacket. It's colder than a witch's tent in a brass bra in Yukon winter out here. Oh, cow. Money. Alright. Now remember when I said I got good news and I got bad news? Well, the good news is I figured it out. I haven't figured out why there's no power going to those wires, but I figured it out. Thanks again, John. And to all those who offered suggestions, thank you. Thank you for offering your suggestions. Yeah. Now the bad news. Well, let's back up a few years to when that engine originally came out. Now, the reason that I took that engine out of the Suburban was I was replacing the transmission. Actually, I rebuilt the transmission 3 times trying to chase down some hard part issue that was kind of throwing a wrench in the works. And I ended up breaking down and buying a reman transmission from AutoZone. And while the transmission was out of the truck, I thought, well, this is probably a good time to go through this engine and replace all the seals and all the gaskets and at least get into it and see how messed up this engine really is, because who knows how many miles are on this engine, right? So I took it apart and I mic'd everything, and everything was within spec, and everything looked really good until I got to the main journals of the crankshaft. I got to a couple of the main journals on the crankshaft. They were, I don't want to say they were questionable, they were beyond questionable. This crank really should have been turned, and I elected not to. The pistons, the original pistons, had a lot of carbon buildup on the you know, the ring grooves, and there's like little oil grooves that hold oil right below the ring grooves, and those were all caked and coked with oil, just caked on crud. So I soaked those for a couple of days in Purple Power. Don't do that. Don't take your pistons and soak them in Purple Power. It will eat whatever coating is on the outside of the pistons completely off. And I ended up looking at those and like, no, I'm not going to even try to use them. I threw them away, and I found a set of pistons on eBay for like $50. I mean, just dirt cheap. Sealed powered, standard size pistons and rings. And I rerung and I put new bearings in there. And my intention was to at least try it. If worst case scenario, I would spin a bearing and I would have to get back into it and put a 1010 crank in it. That's still a possibility. I don't know. But I did run this thing up to where it started building a little bit of engine temperature, and it felt to me like it was starting to get a little tight. So, you know, in reality, this thing is probably going to end up spinning a main bearing. But for right now, I'm gonna put the rest of it back together. I'll throw the hood on it, and this will get parked in the backyard, and I'm not going to mess with it till spring. So the good news is that I figured out what was going on. The bad news is I haven't figured out why it's going on. And the other part of the bad news is that this is going to get removed from service. I haven't determined whether or not I'm going to sell it yet, because it's a square body. But in all practical purposes, I'm probably going to sell it, because if I don't sell it, that means I'm going to work on it, and that means I'm going to throw money on it, and I don't want to do that. There are other things I want to throw money at, like this. I need to throw money at this. So probably what's going to happen in the spring is that I'm either going to get out the plasma cutter and cut it up and part it out, or I'm going to sell it as a parts truck and take my licks. Well, it moved here under its own power. I take back what I said about this motor being garbage. I don't know if the motor is garbage. I think perhaps if I do put a carbureted intake manifold on it, it will run just fine. You know, I ran this thing yesterday, and you just idling and going through a little bit of throttle input, but not much, because I want those bearings to set. I don't want them to spin on me, and I just kind of want to creep up on operating temperature. You know, get a little bit of heat into it and let it cool down, get a little bit of heat into it and let it break in that way. And it just felt like the engine was tightening up, and I say that because anytime I put any kind of throttle into the, you know, push on the accelerator, the engine would increase in speed very slowly and sluggishly. And you know, I put a muffler, kind of just slipped a muffler on the tailpipe, not the tailpipe, but the Y pipe underneath the truck, so I didn't have to listen to that freaking engine running so loud before I moved it. And I went to go start it up, and it wouldn't start, like it was not getting any fuel. So I let it sit for a couple minutes as I cleaned up a little bit around in the driveway and stuff, and picked up some tools and put them away. And then, you know, I tried again, and actually disconnected the battery because the check engine light was on. So I disconnected the battery. Usually that's the easiest way to clear check engine light, at least on these old TBI engines. And I plugged the battery back in, and I went and started back up again. And I, you know, said, well, it's running, let's move it. So I backed it up and moved it, and it was really, you know, no throttle response at all. In fact, I revved it up and I mashed the gas, and it revved up about 2,000 RPMs, and that was it. But it turns over really good. It's not, you know, it's not stuck. At least it doesn't feel like it's stuck. So maybe I'll just dink with it occasionally, once in a while, and see if I can't break this thing up. And as funds come available, I might go ahead and buy an intake manifold for it and swap this over to a carbureted setup, and just get rid of all the TBI crap anyway. I mean, that's the way I've been running it for 3 years. At least at that point I can, you know, let somebody drive it and not have to worry too much about whether or not they're going to make it to the end of the road or not before it dies. So maybe the Suburban will live to fight another day, but not today. There is a silver lining. I'm not without a drivable vehicle, because yesterday I picked up a new to me vehicle, and Let me introduce you to my new hoopty. 1998 Jeep Cherokee Sport with a 4-liter 6-cylinder engine. I had one of those back in 96. Actually, I bought it in 97. It was a 96 model. Unfortunately, I couldn't keep it. That's still a pretty sore spot in my life. I don't want to talk about it. But I've always wanted to get another one of those Cherokee Sports. And a good friend of mine, Martin, has a 98. He's got it all fixed up and all lifted and stuff. I'm not going to do that to this. This is it's a high mileage vehicle. It's like 280,000 miles on it, but it runs good. And it's totally unmolested with the exception of the tow apparatus. Somebody used it for to tow behind an RV. But then it's completely bone stock. I like that. So if anybody's going to molest it, it's going to be me. So look for some upcoming videos on the Jeep. Couple of things that I need to address right out the gate because it's just, you know, it's issues on a 20-year-old vehicle. You know, you're going to have them. So here's an update, your follow-up update on Big Ugly. Unfortunately, Big Ugly is gotta go. So I'm done working on Big Ugly other than putting it back together, and you're going to see some more videos, I think, in the future on this, and then after the new year, I'll get back on Bussy, get back up on the bus build. So, until next time, fellas, you have fun, stay safe, shoot straight, keep pounding right, and have a splendid day. So, arrivederci. Owie, Mansoor. Bye now.